So this morning I was on a walk and I found a orchard oriole nest, and I'm here with my camera. Hopefully I can get a shot of it and share it with you. No promises though. But while I'm waiting for, so I've got the nest actually right in view right now, and I'm waiting for the bird to come back. And while I'm waiting, I hear a house wren over to my right. And a little while ago there was a catbird right in front of me on my left. And there's a cardinal in there too, and some other birds that I can hear. But it brings to mind some questions about what drives all of this behavior. It is early June, and the birds somehow, know that it's time for reproduction. Got the nest being built, got the eggs being laid, the male birds are singing, and the answer is, of course, there's two answers. One is the birds are just going to be nesting when it's the best time of year for when food is available for the chicks. That's driven by evolution. And they have physiological processes that help them with that timing. And the physiological processes will include hormones, specifically reproductive hormones such as testosterone or estradiol. Now, testosterone and estradiol in humans, will go up and down a little bit during the year, but we are generally making those hormones year-round. And in fact, people with birthdays that are year-round. There's human babies that are born in December and spring and July and all the months in between. But birds, there's a few species, particularly tropical species, that can breed year-round. But up here in the temperate zones, the reproduction has to be timed just right. Hormones help the bird prepare for that reproductive timing. Okay, the orchard oriole just gave a song to the left. Does that mean it's going to go to the nest soon? I hope so. Well, I did get a shot of the orchard oriole. Hopefully it's pretty good, but I just decided that I was probably too close to the nest. The bird didn't want to go into the actual nest while I was there, particularly talking to you. No offense, but you're too noisy. Just kidding. Well, I was talking about how testosterone in human beings is pretty much a little fluctuation now and then during the year, but birds, on the other hand, go through great fluctuations in reproductive hormones. It turns out that during the non-breeding parts of the year, that is late summer, fall, all of winter, early spring, that reproductive hormones are quite low. And then they basically explode during the spring to facilitate the setting up of territories and bird song, the finding of a mate, the actual mating, the copulation, And then different hormones are involved in parental care, such as incubation and feeding of the young. Once those things are accomplished, then again the hormones go way down. A lot of birds, the testes and ovaries that are producing these reproductive hormones, they shrink to almost nothing. Ultimately, this is an energy-saving strategy. It is inappropriate for birds to be mating and having young in the wintertime when there's no food to feed them. So the birds just basically shut those systems down, and they don't have to maintain them, don't have to put energy into them. So how do these birds, their bodies, know when it is time, when it's appropriate for mating, and when reproductive hormones should increase? It all has to do with, let's see, where is the sun? There's the sun. More specifically, the length of the day. And it's the same principle for how plants and trees know when it is appropriate to leaf out and to flower. The days begin to, the shortest day is in mid-February, mid to late. What am I talking about? As you know, the shortest day of the year is the start of winter in December. From that point on, the days lengthen just by a minute or two each day until you get to summer, about now, when the days have gotten really long, and the day length is going to be the longest in late June. Now, the birds don't have wristwatches, and they're not timing the length of the day, not consciously. But they do have eyes, and the retinas are transmitting information to the bird's brain about how many hours of daylight there are. And the brain is sensitive, very sensitive, to the number of hours and minutes of sunlight. Now, it's not, timed specifically for each day because we do have cloudy days with lots of precipitation in the wintertime, and so that can screw things up. But it's kind of the average amount of daylight per day during the winter, and it's compared with during the spring. Birds can be sensitive to change in day length by as much or by as little as 10 minutes. So they are aware that mid-December, when it is the shortest day of the year, they're aware that that's different than late December or early January, when the day is ever so slightly longer. What these changes in day length do is, again, the information is received by the brain, and the brain then signals the gonads, the testes and ovaries, to start producing testosterone and estrogen. And those hormones will slowly ramp up as appropriate. It's not just day length, but also air temperature and food supply and social environment. So it's inappropriate, even if the day length is kind of right for reproducing. If the air temperature is too cold, then the brain sort of shuts down testosterone production and estrogen production because if it's too cold, there's not going to be enough food. And if there's not enough food to sort of start up the reproductive process, then the brain's going to tell the testes and ovaries to just put it on hold, don't produce as much reproductive hormone. Likewise, it is not worth it to produce testosterone or estrogen if there's not a conducive social environment to finding a mate. And so we know, for instance, that some birds will become more stimulated when they are interacting with birds of the same species. So if you're all alone, there's no point in being reproductive because, well, sorry. Human reproduction is similar. I don't think we're all that sensitive to food supply, but the social situation can lead to in humans' case, a diminishing of the reproductive hormones. It's well known that during stressful periods, such as war or social unrest, that women's menstrual cycles are interrupted, and the women's bodies are just putting more energy into coping with that stress than in reproduction. And birds will do the same thing if there's a major winter storm or social unrest amongst the flock. I'm not really sure what that would entail, but I imagine that if there's a dominance interaction, the birds sort of have to figure that part out first, and then they can get busy reproducing. I almost forgot to talk about the reverse. When the breeding season is coming to an end, how do the birds sort of know that and shut off the production of reproductive hormones? That switch is called the Photorefractory Switch, and you don't need to know that term. But at some point, and it varies from species to species, the birds become insensitive to daylight, and they just turn off the secretion of testosterone and estrogen. And at that point, then the gonads shrink down to nearly nothing, and they are no longer interested in mating, building nests or anything like that, or defending territory either. Now, as I said, that varies, that sort of initiation of photorefractoriness, that differs from species to species. And the reason it differs is because some species have shorter reproductive cycles than others, and so some species can fit in more than one nest cycle per spring and summer, whereas other species only breed one time per year. In any event, at some point it's late in the season, and the birds have to start getting ready. The adult birds have to start getting ready for migration or preparing for the winter time. And the young birds of the year, well, they have to be mature enough that they can survive on their own. And so it's no longer appropriate again for them to start reproducing. Because let's say you have a nest in September, that's not going to be enough time for the young birds to become independent prior to the winter.